Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Augmented Advisor podcast from the RIA Summit 2022. You may notice something really weird about this intro.
So weird. It's really weird.
It's in person, like this isn't digitally. John Prendergast from Bluey is here.
I'm here.
In person.
Live, in person, right here.
We're no longer 2,000 miles apart when we're doing the show.
Right.
This is fantastic.
It's fantastic. It is great to see you in person, man.
I know, I've missed you so terribly. It's great. It's good to see you.
Awesome.
So we recorded several podcasts here from the show at this desk.
Live. First ever, really, for us.
Exactly. And we're actually having the guest next to us, which was really awesome, really interesting to get that experience. And we've learned a lot about recording shows at a conference.
And you'll experience that learning with us.
And by the way, the conference themselves, they've learned a lot about how to position where their podcasts
absolutely.
are. And we're actually, you can't see it on this camera, but right next to us, so they're doing other interviews. So occasionally in these shows, you're going to feel some bleed over from other conversations. But they came up pretty darn good.
It's great. Adds the ambiance, I think.
It does add an ambiance. Is a great
Ambiance.
word. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I love it. So our first guests for the show are Jeff Benjamin from Investment News, which is the company that is putting on the RIA Summit, and Chuck Failla from Sovereign Financial Group.
That's it.
Listen, I have a pitch for us in the show, because here's the deal. They're handing out free T-shirts, which, you know, all conferences, you're getting some free swag. I got my daughter a little whale, because who doesn't like whales, right? But this is awesome. We need T-shirts, John, that have our faces on them. Because
my face there? I don't know.
Our first guest with Jeff and Chuck, their faces on the shirt. So what you're going to see pretty soon is Mike Langford walking around with a Mike Langford shirt with a little QR code on the back that says if you want to order the shirt. No? Not good?
Let's try it. Let's see what happens. I'm up for an experiment.
I love it. So anyway, the first episode of the show that we recorded here, again, is with Chuck and Jeff. And we talk about a variety of things, but mainly, you know, what spurred them to create this conference? Why is an RIA Summit necessary, and the value that RIAs are getting out of it? So really, really exciting conversation. I think you're going to love it.
Absolutely. It's going to be fantastic. Hang on.
Let's do it. Let's get to the conversation with Chuck and Jeff.
All right.
Well, all right. Thanks for having us.
We're here, baby.
We are here.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I am so excited about this because I had Chuck on a podcast last year, and part of what we talked about on the podcast was this RIA Summit, how it came about. And the first one you did was virtual, right?
Yes, the first.
And I was just getting this story. Yeah, this is a great story.
Yeah,
because I thought that this was the first one, but he fixed me right up. So let's fix the audience up. So how'd this get going, man?
So this started about 2 years ago this week, give or take, right? And this was actually initially done as Go RIA, a virtual summit, and I produced it on my personal Zoom account. And it was going to be
big budget, right?
Big budget. We spared no costs, and it was going to be for like a local FPA event, basically, right? Financial Planning Association.
Yeah.
And so we reached out to some different speakers. We started getting some big speakers. We got Jeff Benjamin, which we were very happy to get. No, that's true. And so then I would reach out.
Has nothing to do with you being sitting right here.
No, it is a fact. And then what Jeff may or may not even know, I'm not even sure if we talked about this, but then I started talking to some really big name people as well, like from industry, some CEOs and stuff. I was like, well, you know, we have a lot of big name folks, like, for example, I don't know, Jeff Benjamin, as if we had a list of like 15 big names. It kind of stopped with Jeff. But then we started getting some big ones,
right there.
Number 2 was Mike McDaniel from Risk Alliance, co-founder and I believe CIO. And then we really started getting some momentum from that. And then what was going to be like literally a 20 or 30 person Connecticut thing, we ended up with 250 people showing up, virtually. And it was really kind of a big success. And not so much, I mean, we had great content, great speakers for sure. But what it was there's such an appetite then, and there is now for sure, for people looking to go RIA, right? As we know, there's a land rush, right? From the wirehouse, the broker-dealer space over to the RIA space. And we had essentially a half a day's worth of content of really the main things you want to know for going RIA. And people just really wanted that content. And so that was the first one we did. And it was great. And then I ended up speaking with Jeff, of course, afterwards, and some of the other folks in Investment News saying, hey, why don't we do this together in like a real meaningful way? And then that's happened here.
When Chuck first reached out to me, and I thought, well, we get requests a lot to do moderate podcast or webcast, whatever, stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, it's always fun. I'll do it, whatever. And once we did it, and I sat through it, and I actually wrote a story about it, one of the sessions or a couple of the sessions, I was like, this is something that Investment News has to start to get really deep into. I mean, because we always kind of covered on the, we cover it as it comes up. Brokers breaking away, the trends, and as it happens, some of the bigger moves we report. I'm like, this is a whole, franchise, and this is what we've kind of grown into. I took it to some of my people at Investment News, and I'm like, let's just get involved with Chuck a little bit more, and that's what it is right now. I mean, this is our third RIA Summit, our first in-person RIA Summit, but in addition to the summit, we've done RIA Labs, which are more one-off and concentrate on a specific area of the transition, and this is where we are now, and as we're going to unfold over the next 2 days, we've got bigger and better plans for basically developing and really owning this space.
I mean, it's amazing to me, and the energy around the conference is really fantastic. It's different than other conferences, but if I'm sitting in one of your chairs before this all gets started, I'm thinking, why another conference? What'd you see that led you to think, yeah, there's a space here? Like, what was it?
Yeah, it's that appetite for people looking to go RIA. Mm-hmm. And, I went RIA myself. I was a breakaway advisor about 3 years ago. And essentially that's why we started putting together that content. And I was like starved for information. Like, how do I do this? And how do I choose a custodian? And how can I do annuities? Or how can I do whatever fee-based type product I want? And it led to the content.
Yeah, and that, speaking of the content, specifically the way this is distinct and will continue to be distinct from what else is out there in the RIA space as far as conferences. Obviously, this industry is fraught with conferences, giant conferences, smaller conferences. Ours is designed to be this almost a turnkey solution on if you're going RIA, if you're going independent, we're going to check off the boxes on everything you need to know, from choosing your custodian to outsourcing your asset management to finding your tech stack to renting your office space. And as Chuck and I have talked about this, I compare it to like when you're sending your kid to college, okay? Most people have, however many kids they have, once they're done with that process, they don't think about it anymore. They don't think about, all right, that's somebody else's problem. They got to worry about getting their kids through college, saving for it, finding the right college, sending them through all that other stuff, keeping them out of trouble while they're in college. But this is kind of the same thing with the breakaway movement. You only break away once. You might move around, but you do it once. So you need to know everything you need to know, and then you go and let somebody else worry about it. And that's why this is just the source of people looking for this information is kind of never ending.
Yeah. So many things I want to dive into. But the one that just really popped in my mind is like, I see what's in this for Investment News. I get it. You cover the space, and your audience is RIAs and maybe would-be RIAs, but Chuck, I mean, you got your own business, man. What are you doing giving away the secret sauce to other people? Like, why would you say, I'm going to go, teach other people how to do what I'm doing, right? What is it about that for you? What are you getting out of it?
Sure. Number one, I love the space. I really, truly love the space. And what I would put out there is no other industry, and no one's ever pushed back on this. There is no other industry that has such an attractive ratio of relatively low barrier to entry and upside potential, right? So you could get yourself a laptop in a dream, right? And you could be an RIA, and your upside is close to limitless. And there's very few industries that could say that. So I just love the excitement of it. Now, I also don't like disingenuousness, if that's a word, I think, right?
It is now.
It is now. You heard it here first on the Augmented Advisor.
And they're a lot of fun to do. I get to have cigars with this guy, which is awesome.
I wasn't invited. I was too late.
Tuesday night,
I saw it there.
And he was hurt. He was really hurt, honestly.
But look, we are a firm that is growing, and this gives us exposure, right? And I love telling the story about the RIA space. And for those that are interested, I love telling the sovereign story. And it gives me the opportunity to do both on occasion.
And the reason that this does work as well as it does, like I said, when Chuck brought this to me, I mean, like I said, we were kind of covering it. We weren't oblivious to the idea of a breakaway movement, but we never did anything kind of like this. A lot of the conferences in this space are and even a lot of the coverage in the space. It's kind of the big pictures, practice management and stuff like that. But to concentrate on this particular market is kind of really where it's all happening right now as far as the RIA Summit goes and Go RIA. But Chuck brings so much to this because he is there in the field. I mean, we're journalists at Investment News. We're providing the content. We can look at this, but we don't. I mean, Chuck acts almost like a consultant for us, even though him and I are co-chairs on this thing, and we're going to continue to work together, Chuck and I, as we develop and break out this Go RIA franchise. But yeah, I ask Chuck all the time. It's like, why do you do this? I mean, we send him a nice bottle of wine at the end of every event. And I'm like, is that enough for you?
I'll do anything.
I get paid to do this.
I'll take it.
This is my job. But yeah, anyway.
One other thing I was going to throw into that, and what I'm doing here as far as the research for the panels I do is stuff I'm doing anyway.
Right.
Because I'm researching these people for Sovereign.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of times these panels, I'm moderating the panel, but I'm also as much an attendee of that panel as anything else, because I'm essentially doing due diligence. And I will say one of the things that's been great, is my having now the ability to call up saying, oh, we're doing some research for Investment News, and I get really excellent access in large part for what I'm producing content for Investment News, but also when I'm doing research for Sovereign, I'm doing my own due diligence on this direct indexing option or this CRM. So that's been hugely beneficial too, and I just love the business side of this business, and this really affords me an opportunity to dive into it even deeper than I have in the past.
I gotta tell you, one of the things I've told people, I run an event at South by Southwest every year, and I always tell people, like, one of the things it does for me is it kind of creates my own gravity, right? People come to me with ideas. They come to me and tell me about new companies that are starting and so forth. When they're coming to South by, they want to make sure that they talk to Mike because they know that's where it's happening. And I imagine some of the same things are happening for you. You kind of describe, like, you pick up the phone and call somebody, they want to talk to you. But I also imagine there's some inbound of, like, you're getting the new ideas about innovation. You're getting the new ideas of what trends are happening in the industry that might be interesting because people want to talk to you and they want to be a part of this, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that has happened. And I'm a person that loves ideas, and I've always been historically a very early adopter for lots of things, for good and bad. But I love that idea. And people have been reaching out saying, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you heard of that?" For example, we've started our own PEP, a pool employer plan, right, which is a really neat little niche, and that came to us in large part as a result of the work I've been doing with Investment News, and we were one of the first firms, and we're not a huge firm, but we consistently punch above our weight, and one of the reasons for that is the exposure and the access I've been afforded with this.
And it's a very different experience, I would imagine, to explore technology options or outsourcing options or investment options from the lens of a journalist, more so than from the lens of someone who might be buying something through the sales department.
Yes.
I would imagine that's pretty different.
Absolutely.
Well, and Chuck does some writing for us too.
Yeah.
Is it a regular column or is it
Regularist, but I'm saving it for the big reveal tomorrow. And that's going to accelerate.
All right. So
You heard it here first.
So,
from the
but
Augmented
what I was
Advisor.
hearing Chuck talk about, it's kind of interesting. He's talking about how he's doing research on these different, like, employer plans and stuff like that, because it's content that he needs for his own practice, but it's also stuff that we can build out with this Go RIA thing. I kind of compare that to, I don't have a financial planner, but I talk to financial planners all day long. So I kind of get the free advice. If I got a little snag I'm dealing with or something like that, hey, what do you think about this and stuff like that? Sometimes it's for a story. Sometimes it's just a side conversation for my own personal messed up portfolio.
That makes me think about the content of the conference. And I think one of the unique perspectives that Investment News has, obviously, is your perspective is the industry. And so I'm curious, as you think about the trends over the last year, what you think is sort of on the rise, how are those trends reflected in the content of the conference? And I'm thinking along the lines of, investment. I'm thinking along the lines of technology. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the trends that you're seeing and how you're delivering that here?
Well, as far as it's kind of two different things, all right? There, in investment news, I always tell people we write for and about the financial services industry, okay? So there's a lot of, I don't like to refer to them as silos because we all really do work together, but we have regulatory coverage with a reporter in Washington. We have a technology reporter to talk about the tech stack and the developments there and the fast growing things that are happening in technology. We have asset management and investments, which is largely my focus. It's probably the biggest thing I focus on. And we look at the brokerage industry generally and specifically. We look at the way people are getting in trouble in the industry. We look at rules that are changing and laws that are changing. And another thing that's a big focus of mine is practice management. And that's where this would fit in, practice management, because a lot of what we do here, like, we're not going to focus on, at a conference like this, on, real specifically on investment products and strategies. We're going to talk about how to get access to investment products and strategies and how to outsource your asset management if you want to through TAMPs and whatnot. But that's more for like an established financial advisor. We're kind of looking at this as these financial advisors or brokers who would be financial advisors. We're trying to give them the roadmap and everything they need to get into this space and prosper. So that's why I keep referring to this as a franchise, because it's not some bolt-on thing, or it's not something we're just kind of hanging out there that we're going to steal stuff from investment news to populate. This is a whole separate thing. Well, it's supported obviously by investment news, but it's its own kind of living entity. And like I said, the stuff you'll see through Go RIA with Chuck and I's leadership is really going to be all along the lines of getting people into this space.
Right.
Yeah, it's huge and it's growing, and like I said, it's moving on that conveyor belt, because once you did it, you don't need to look back and do it again. I mean, you could still be, I would think any established or working RIA could always go back and continue to absorb the kind of stuff we're providing and say, oh, I want to review my tech stack now, or I want to rethink about my custodial relationship, or relook at the fees I'm charging, or anything along those lines.
And it is a real flood. I mean, a lot of the numbers I see are 100, 200 a month new firms.
Sure. Yeah. And that's just firms, let alone people tucking into firms.
Exactly.
It's got to be in the thousands.
It's got to be.
But just to take your point just a little bit further, so the distinction between what we're doing here with the Go RIA content versus another conference. So two of my favorite panels are the fee-based everything panels and the fee-based annuity panels. And so we're going to talk about annuities and insurance and alternative investments and cash management and gold even. And it's not the context, and it's not through the lens of why you should invest in gold today or why you should invest in alts today. It has nothing to do with that. But rather, if you're going to invest in alternative investments, if you're going to invest in annuities, if you're going to invest in some sort of cash management solution, here's the logistics on how you could do it. How can you integrate with your Orion, and how can you integrate with your CRMs, and how do you make it happen, as opposed to someone pontificating for why you should buy alts today. And there's conferences for that. I just came back from a great one with that content. But this is more, okay, you want the alts, you want the gold, you want the annuity, but you don't have a Series 7 anymore. How do you get access to that, right? And as I like to say, I don't need those stinking badges. We don't need those stinking 7. You don't need it anymore. You could just do whatever you want. And I'm going to do that panel tomorrow. And I've done this panel before. And I like to start off saying, look, you're at a wirehouse, you're at a broker dealer. Think of something you want to do that you think you can't do without a 7. And there's nothing.
Right.
4 years ago, there would be some answers to that question. But today, the answer to the question, are you missing anything by not having in the 7? And the answer is no, you're not. You're not missing a thing.
Yeah, I try to imagine what you could possibly be missing. It's like your broker dealer can serve, whether it's Fidelity or Schwab or whoever you're working with, they can serve those needs, whether it's the alts or whatever. Yeah.
They're just fee based. They're no longer commission based. Right.
Right.
It changes the entire dynamic.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's better for the client.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot less friction. It's easier to do once you build the pipeline and the plumbing, as they like to say. It's less expensive. And a lot of what's happening is you're driving costs out of the system for the client, you're driving costs out of the system for the advisor.
Right.
So the advisor's making more money and the client's saving money. What you're taking out is perhaps that layer of fat that's in the perhaps BD space.
Yeah. Well, and you're also taking out some of the pressure, right? So the client doesn't necessarily know this, but a lot of the advisors who are in an IBD environment are feeling pressure from the BD to move certain types of products or behave, conduct their business in a certain way, right? And taking that pressure off to be more free to be an actual business owner, to treat your clients the way you want to treat them, right? Is really empowering, I think.
Yeah. Business owner is a great way to put it. And the way I look at it, I was with a BD for 20 years, and it was fantastic. And I built a really wonderful career. Now I'm building a really wonderful business, and that's the distinction.
Yeah, and that's a big distinction.
For sure.
It also sounds like a lot of the content here might be a bit more actionable, directly actionable by the type of folks that are going to attend this conference.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're given this roadmap
Yeah.
in the blueprint or whatever analogy you want to use, but that's kind of the idea. That's why we had these things segmented this way. If you look at our RIA labs that we've done, they'll focus on specific areas that you have to think about if you're going to start your own business.
Right.
And I think there were some panels to that on that idea, right? How to build tech stacks. And
Tech stacks, choosing your custodian.
Your phone system. I mean, it gets granular.
Everything.
What do you need to break away?
So many things you wouldn't think of otherwise.
Yeah.
Like phone. I've got my cell phone. No. You actually need a business phone system.
How can you integrate it with your Salesforce?
Absolutely.
Wow, you could do that. Like all the stuff that you could do because you are really a business owner at that point.
Yeah. It's always
It's
a
amazing.
fascinating thing. I talk to people who have, had their whole career working at a big co, whatever that is, whether it's in this industry or out. And when you go out on your own, some of the first things you notice is, hey, there's no supply closet.
Right.
I don't get to go. Hey, the printer's out of toner. Not that we print as much stuff anymore, but you're like, oh, guess who's going to fill the supply closet?
Right.
This guy.
That's
You're
right.
going to go and get that stuff.
But all solvable problems.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
My favorite story, and this is a true story. I was talking to an advisor. He was with one of the big wirehouses, and he was thinking about going RIA. And I swear he asked, so how do you guys get business cards? I was like, I don't know. I order business cards. Like, what are you talking about? Like, they are so, they suffer from this atrophy because, the wirehouse is doing everything for them. They just don't
call your
realize.
assistant there, right?
It's not that hard. And a lot of what we're doing is literally, and this is going to be announced a little bit more in depth tomorrow, like checklists, things that you want to put together. I mean, very actionable, conceptual at first, but really down to make sure you order a phone system, make sure you order business cards. How do you do that? Really step by step.
It's great.
That is it's way more powerful than I think we've given it credit for. Seriously, because I can speak from my own personal experience in life in general. Every once in a while, you're thinking about doing something big, but starting a new business or whatever. And there's this little detail that freezes you. Like, well, what am I going to do with that thing? Like, what CRM am I going to... And you think about it constantly, and it starts like driving you nuts, and it actually stops you from taking the rest of the action, right? Because you're terrified of the business cards or whatever. Like, and some of these wirehouses, the big ones, like they even book all your travel for you. Like they have like an in-house travel agency that calls you up saying, okay, what time would you like to leave, Mike? Okay, great.
Right.
Good. Okay, well, I've got you on an 8:00 flight, and you're going to... Whatever. That's not going to happen for you anymore unless you're, I guess, starting out really big and you got an assistant. But so I think this is incredibly powerful stuff. What are some of the things that, we're recording this before you actually hit the stage and everything gets going. What are some of the things you're most looking forward to this year that might be new stuff that you haven't talked about in previous years?
Well, I tell you, this is the end of the session. Our final session is always about fees. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorites. It's something that I write a lot about. The industry loves talking about fees. Sometimes they don't like hearing about fees, but they like talking about it. And Chuck and I, we have a lot of conversations between the two of us on a lot of the topics that we put together for these sessions. Another one that we're going to have this year, and I'm kind of talking my own book here. These are the ones that I'm moderating. Is one on the M&A of the mergers and acquisitions, consolidation in the RIA space.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's in addition to the breakaway movement to going independent. That's something that's just growing record numbers every single year. Now, granted, if you're thinking about going independent right now, you're probably not thinking about selling your firm before you even have a firm. But it's still good to have that perspective on what the appetite is out there and what's going on in terms of consolidation and people out there pursuing scale. So those are two of the things that I'll be talking about.
M&A in particular is it's a long game if you want to do it well. If you're ultimately thinking you want to exit as a firm owner, you need to build it as a firm, not as a practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's got to be a business, not a practice.
Right.
And you should be doing that from day one.
Well, that's a good point. At some point, if you're building a firm, at some point you're going to have to, liquidate the thing.
Right. There's got to be an exit.
Well, look,
I
Father
used to
Time
be
is
an investment
undefeated.
banker. Don't hate me
Right?
for it.
At some point in time, you are not going to be doing that business anymore, right?
Right.
Either, drop dead or you won't be able to do it or whatever, or life changes, right?
Right.
Your clients will start, whatever. So, M&A will be in your future, whether it's an internal M&A.
Or it's being pried out of your cold dead
Right,
hands.
exactly. But it's really been interesting. We had Scott Wetzel and Aaron Hassler from Skyview Partners on an episode of the show. I think it was earlier this year, and they provide financing for M&As. And one of the things that's been really interesting with the likes of Skyviews and several others, and I think there's a firm here, Advisor Financing, is here as a sponsor. One thing that's really interesting about this is financing used to not be available for this type of stuff. It was always seller finance, right? You show up and you maybe put 20% down to buy the business and to be like a 4 or 5 year earnout. Suddenly, M&A is a viable growth strategy for an RIA because you can actually acquire the capital relatively inexpensively with a traditional commercial loan and then acquire a business, right?
Well, because folks like those are teaching banks who are backing them how to understand the marketplace and how to value a firm. And that takes a lot of the risk out of it for banks, therefore the capital can roll in. For sure. Former investment banking perspective, sorry.
Always forget, watch out when you mentioned acquisition stuff, John gets going.
Well, right, but another point that is private equity is a big influence
Absolutely.
in consolidation of it's kind of funny. You always think of things like private equity. It's like, that's got to be where the smart money is, right? How come it took private equity until recently? And I'm saying within the past 5 years to really kind of identify this space. Now that they've identified it, they got their targets on it. They're gobbling it up. They're having
where a
a major
lot of
impact.
capital is. Smart, not smart. Okay. That depends on the firm.
All right.
Smart money is not always smart money.
It's always money. It's green.
Exact money. This works. Exactly. Well, this is really fantastic. I'm really looking forward to taking in some of the sessions as well. I'm thrilled to have you guys join us on the show. What do you want to close this thing out? What do you want to do?
Yeah, so actually, for those who aren't attending live, what's going to be available, post-show? Is there content available? Are you sort of planning to extend the experience in some way?
Well, we're not recording it as far as video. But there are reporters here from Investment News who will be writing stories on it. And as we always do, this is a kind of a growing organic building thing. So I know that there will be upcoming labs in the new year. We're definitely going to be doing another RIA Summit next fall. I think we've already slated New York for our location. And as we'll kind of roll out over the course of the next 2 days this Go RIA franchise that we're going to kind of brand. There will be a lot more coming. I'm just saying, as far as the RIA Summit and the RIA Labs and Go RIA, it's going to be more from Investment News, a lot more.
It's great. So it sounds like if you're a new firm or thinking about becoming a new firm, you've got lots of online content from Investment News. You've got the labs that are going to be available online. And, of course, register for the next summit.
Right.
Absolutely.
And tune in tomorrow morning for the big reveal because there's even a little bit more
right.
than that. That's what do you guys call that? I forget that term. Not embargo.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Well, it would be an embargo.
We're not
can't
live.
talk about it.
Yeah,
and we're
embargo.
technically not journalists, so we can't be allowed.
Either way, that's why I'm still at a loss for some of the lingo. But this would be great, guys. Thank you
This
so
is
much.
fantastic. Well, Jeff
right.
Benjamin, Chuck Failla, thank you so much for stopping by. Here's to a good show.
Thank
All right.
you.
Great
Thank
chat.
you.
Thanks, guys.
A lot of fun.
All
Thanks.
right.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this very special episode of the Augmented Advisor podcast. It was so fantastic to have John and myself in the same venue, recording with guests live, and being amongst the hustle and bustle of the 2022 RIA Summit. So special thanks to Chuck Failla and Jeff Benjamin for inviting us to come and record a few episodes of the podcast right there, kind of on the show floor, if you will. And we've got several more coming for you, so stay tuned for that, all right? By the way, if you haven't done so already, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a topic or a guest of the show, hit us up, podcast@blueleaf.com, or swing by blueleaf.com and use that little contact form. Love to hear from you. Okay, stay tuned. More podcasts coming from RIA Summit 2022. See ya. Bye.